Perfecta. Muchas gracias a los invitados que han estado hoy, tanto presencial como remoto. Vamos a seguir con el turno ahora del orador principal, del Keynote Speaker. Tenemos a Nick Hall en Inglaterra. Espero que ya esté conectado. Les informo que ahora la sesión va a ser en inglés, con lo cual, si ustedes necesitan traducción simultánea, tienen que ir a su móvil con sus auriculares. Ya veo aquí un señor que está utilizando el auricular. Vayan a la plataforma de streaming y seleccionen el idioma que quieren escuchar, ¿de acuerdo? Vamos a ir hablando en inglés y también el orador irá respondiendo en inglés. So allow me to switch into English to introduce Nick Hall. He is the CEO and founder of DTTT, the Digital Tourism Think Tank. We also going to try to speak slowly so that the translation services have enough time to translate. He's going to be, basically we're going to throw him some questions and then we'll have some time in the end for questions from the audience, of course, and hopefully we'll be finished around 11 o'clock so that we can go and have a coffee afterwards. Hello, good morning. How are you, Nick? Of course, we tried.
Good morning.
Yes, great.
Can you hear me now? Excellent.
Wonderful. Good.
These things are inevitable when you do a hybrid conference for the first time, but I'm so pleased to be there with you. And I was just saying that it is it's so disappointing that I'm not able to be there with you in person. And I'm just so impressed with the whole team behind the event that have decided to make it happen despite all of the challenges. So congrats on the team. And I'm definitely looking forward to discussing all of the challenges we face right now and sharing some views on that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being there this morning. You're in the UK. Nick, we'll try to speak slowly so that we have enough time for the translation services. Let me just set the stage, first of all, to talk about what is your background. Your background, Nick, is in destination management and destination marketing, for more than a decade. Nick is one of the tourism industry's leading experts on destination marketing, and as a founder of the Digital Tourism Think Tank, in short, DTTT, this is the leading platform connecting destinations worldwide on topics around digital trends and transformation. Nick has worked with hundreds of destinations, helping to navigate the complexities of an increasingly digital visitor experience. Nick, I think it is likely that 2020 will be remembered as an inflection year, a year where many economic sectors were put on hold, and tourism is not an exception, where really we had to restart, we had to redefine a lot of our activities as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Experts say that over the course of 6 months, we have accelerated many processes and embedded technological and digital tools in our daily lives exponentially, which in turn has catapulted us 6 years ahead in time. Do you think, Nick, that humans have a proven track of adapting to difficult circumstances and challenging environments? And in this regard, do you think we will be able to cope easily with such a shift in the tourism sector, or will this take its toll?
Thank you, Ignacio. Well, it's certainly a very valid question. And the simple answer is, will we be able to adapt easily? I think not, but we will cope. It's a very challenging time for all of us in the industry, and we're all learning how to adapt to the situation, and it keeps changing. So it's not an easy transition to make, but I believe that as an industry, we're strong, we're resilient, and we will be able to cope. The honest truth is that many businesses simply will not be able to survive this. That's a fact, and it's a reality that we have to be ready to accept. And even strong and very viable businesses whose business model is heavily dependent on international travelers, or whose core operating model is simply not agile enough to adapt quickly, will also find this period very, very difficult, or are finding this period very, very difficult. So these are just some of the realities. It's not something, I guess, that anybody wants to really say, but it is certainly a reality that we have to accept. The other thing is that the sector has shrunk, and it will remain smaller for some time to come. And even after a vaccine is found, which we hope, and some sort of normality returns, this is obviously going to lead to heightened competition and to more businesses competing for less customers. So this is one of the other facts of this current situation that we have to be aware of. And what this really means is that as a business or as an industry, we need to be even smarter, even more efficient, and even more agile to work with these realities and to still be competitive. But personally, I remain very, very optimistic. And I do think that things will recover in a very strong way. But we need to make that progress. And even without something like a vaccine, we will see a recovery anyway, as we have already started to see.
I hear you. And as you can see, there's a lot of concern. People really have lots of questions, and nobody has the crystal ball so that we could ask all these questions to. My concern, and the one of many other people, is that do you think that will this transformation irreversibly shape the tourism sector into a less humane and touchless activity? Or do you envisage that we will go back to basics when this is all over? Can you show us your crystal ball?
Thank you for asking it. You know, this is a question I had probably before the pandemic, because I've always been a strong advocate of digital. And now this question has a completely different meaning, because we know that consumers and travelers are looking for experiences where they can feel isolated and they can feel safer. So the simple answer to your question is yes and no. It's true that contactless experiences are one of the biggest disruptive factors of the current moment. They're expected to be the grounds upon which businesses compete. And this certainly isn't something which is likely to go away after the pandemic. However, what we can see is that there is also a need now from travelers for more premium and more value-driven experiences. This is something that's heightened, meaning that whilst the way in which we perhaps transact or redeem products and services may have changed, those personal touches and the thoughtfulness that we can offer as an industry has become even more important than before, because our value system has changed and because people may travel less but want more meaningful experiences. And the shift goes beyond just contact. It's a shift in the way in which we plan travel. Over the last few years, we had seen this huge move towards in-trip decision-making, towards whimsical or on-the-go planning, thanks to mobile and thanks to being connected all of the time. COVID-19 has really changed this. In particular, many popular attractions are now having to introduce technology to help visitors forward plan, make reservations in advance, and make bookings on the go whilst they're in the attraction, rather than actually speaking to a person. So this is a big behavioral shift, which I think much of that will change. And many businesses will be looking now at the efficiencies that they can create with technology and the insights that they can gain from things like forward predictability with many, many more people reserving in advance. And this is a whole different form of customer engagement. But I think other aspects will bounce back, perhaps not to basics, but to something that's more similar to how things were before. I don't think all of us will forever plan every detail of our trip so far in advance once the pandemic, the fears of the pandemic go away. So I think it's going to be a mixed picture.
Indeed. Thank you, Nick. We also discussed previously about the principles, the sustainability principles, the SDGs, the Agenda 2030, and I think that's also coming to the surface. It's really coming with a lot of strength. Do you think that will the respect and the promotion for sustainability principles, namely the SDGs, truly become a driving force in the tourism and travel industry in the years to come, or are they just simply part of a transient trend, of something that will just vanish after everything is back to normal?
Well, absolutely. I think this is something which is going to be increasing in people's consciousness. Before the pandemic, there was growing awareness of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, in particularly amongst businesses who started to understand what that meant for them. But we also saw a more socially conscious traveler and a need to respond to those. what we could see from some of the consumer focus groups that we ran over the last couple of months with beautiful destinations was that there is a growing consumer base, particularly amongst the Gen Z demographic, which is actually demanding this from the brands and the businesses that they choose to purchase from. So they're using their power as a consumer. So what does this mean for travel? Well, quite simply, your commitment to sustainability is set to become your biggest competitive factor. So that's really an evolution from digital being one of the most competitive factors to sustainability. Many years ago, being findable online was what allowed us to find a competitive edge. But today, the competitive edge hinges on having principles, having values, and having a commitment to sustainability. And to be competitive, you must fully exploit the transparency offered by digital to demonstrate that and allow your customers to examine the detail of how you run your business and what you stand for as a business. So yes, it is a trend. I agree with you there, but it's not a passing trend. It's something that represents a heightened public awareness around global issues such as climate change, but also local issues such as housing, which obviously a city like Barcelona has been world famous for. And this means that consumers are now much more engaged than they ever have been. And consumerism is something that globally has been increasingly driven by a more conscious consumer. And we've seen in certain verticals, such as fashion retail, that the impact consumers can have on choices and brands is really quite significant. Today, brands are increasingly expected to offer transparency and traceability, with consumers asking them to uphold certain values. So to give you an example, the fashion brand H&M now shows transparency on its supply chain per product in response to that. And if you go to the H&M website, you can see which factory each garment or product was produced in, which is something that we would have never had a few years ago. And that's a revolution that's actually brought about by digital. So these developments are now starting to become mainstream in tourism. This is quite new for tourism as a mainstream priority. So a competitive travel and tourism business needs to be asking itself, what values do we hold ourselves to? How do we reduce or mitigate the impact of our activities? And how do we give back to society? And these are the key things that we now need to be asking, especially if we're in a process of redesigning the business.
That's a very wise advice. Thank you, Nick. While you talk, I'm also monitoring the chat in case any of the attendees or all those participants at home, would you like to send your questions at the end? Hopefully we'll have some time for questions. Nick, next question. Do you think that we will be witnessing a major transformation and even a divide among those organizations and companies that will jump on the digital transformation bandwagon and those who will continue doing business as usual?
Well, one thing I think almost everyone can recognize is that in the last 6 months, it has led us all to look digital transformation in the eye and somehow embrace it, willingly or not. So if you just think about what that means for the everyday regular person, how many of us are now having family Zoom calls where we never did that before? How many businesses have decided to go back to traditional office working? Perhaps not very many. And how many businesses have had to completely rethink their reservation and ordering process, or even switch overnight to being an online business? These are just some of the realities when we think about digital transformation that have happened just in the last 6 months. But of course, they're shifts that we've spoken about for the last 10 years. So the digital transformation has been felt by everyone in one respect or another. And the question is, which ones are able to succeed? It certainly looks like those that are most able to succeed are going to be those that are most agile, able to adapt, to reinvent, and to reposition themselves. So the challenges we face right now may be really, really difficult hurdles for businesses to overcome. But those that are agile, those that have a really strong strategic outlook, and those that maintain a broad perspective on where the business can go and how they can reinvent themselves, have the best chance of success. Ultimately, the same entrepreneurialism and creativity, which got businesses to where they are today, is needed stronger than ever for those businesses to adapt themselves in this current situation. So having a strong grasp of the opportunities that digital provides is really key. In fact, it's a given. And this was, of course, the case before, but it's more important than ever right now as we look at a post-pandemic world.
Talking about agility, about resilience, adaptability. I think these are the words that are resonating the most these days. Nick, what are the digital and technological drivers, according to you, that will have a stronger impact in the short and mid-term?
Well, I think there are so many interesting developments technologically, and of course, most of them are not new. They've been with us for some time. But I think if we look immediately right now, one of the biggest technological advancements will be in healthcare technology. So this is perhaps something that we were never discussing at a travel and tourism conference before. But healthcare technology will play a really important role in getting people moving and experiencing the world around them confidently. And there's been so many advancements in recent years in the healthcare technology sector, where smartphones and wearables now allow clinicians to monitor personal health profiles remotely. How many of us have perhaps had a remote doctor's appointment or even managed to read our blood pressure with our own home technology? So the global pandemic means that these developments will now have to factor in things like proximity and contact tracing and compile this massive array of data, which can evolve and form a much better understanding that helps give us confidence in travel. And eventually, these are becoming opportunities for businesses to start to tap into and to start to understand risk, for example, as they start to communicate to customers. So I think we're all going to see a rapid evolution when it comes to healthcare technology. Secondly, contactless technology is something we already discussed. It's been with us for some time, and it now really dominates our daily lives in every single sense. And this is something which is really going to have many, many different points at which we experience contactless technology. We've started to talk about facial recognition, and we can certainly experience that in many more places. And eventually this will find its way into airport security and customer loyalty. For example, checking into a hotel or welcoming back frequent travelers or frequent guests. But it's also about contactless technology at every single detail of how we experience travel. So for example, if we go to a restaurant, it's allowing us to queue remotely if there's a line outside the restaurant, or look at each item on the menu and see what other people thought about that and how they reviewed it and what experience they shared. But also even removing the interaction with the waiter, which we've seen gradually start to happen in restaurants, where they encourage people to now order from the table through the mobile device. And this is now a battleground. Who can provide not the contactless technology, but the best user experience of that contactless technology? And this is where we have to think about competition. Ultimately, it comes down to the brand and the user experience. The contactless technology itself is a given. And then lastly, one of the things which we've been talking about so much is the power and opportunity of AI and data. And this is really starting to change the way in which we live our lives. During the pandemic, all of us, no matter how much we wanted to resist digital, have started to become increasingly interested in data analysis because it's part of our daily newsfeed. We started to get a better understanding of risk, and we started to make our own judgments with regards to safety based on the data that we can get available to us. So with so many complications, the use of automation in our daily lives is starting to now manifest itself in different ways. And it's an opportunity for us to exploit, to both re-simplify our lives, but also help manage those more and more complicated situations. And for companies, there's an opportunity to tap into this, to think about the challenges that their customers face and how smart use of data and automation can actually allow them to either have a renewed sense of confidence because of the transparency that provides, or simplify certain processes. And this is really, I think, something which we won't necessarily see manifest itself in very visible technologies, but it will all be in the granular detail. It will be how we match certain products or experiences with customer preferences. It will be how we communicate a relevant piece of information to a certain profile or type of customer based on the hesitations or concerns they have, and how much of that process is automated versus personalized. And if we just think about chatbots, which is something that everybody is now familiar with, we now see an explosion of chatbots and many companies creating automations and chatbots for very specific scenarios. So you can get restaurant-focused chatbots. You can also get destination-focused chatbots, which help communicate both services and in a crisis. So this is just many of the different ways in which we see these technologies manifesting themselves.
Very interesting insights. Thank you. And I think what you are saying is very crucial, the fact that whatever advances or technological progress we made, it should not go in detriment of the user's experience, and that's key. I hope you don't mind me asking whether, Nick, have you got kids? Have you got children?
I don't know. Oh, I think I lost you. I can't hear you, unfortunately.
No problem. I was asking you, Nick, do you mind me asking you, do you have children?
No, I don't.
No worries. In regards to the new generations, since they're going to play a very important role in the years to come, what are the actions or considerations you think that we should keep in mind when they will be planning their holidays?
Yeah, great question. And actually, what we've seen is something that at least surprised me on a personal level. What we've seen with future generations is that, at least if we look at the Gen Z demographic today, safety is actually their primary concern. And this has been stronger than with other demographics, such as the millennial demographic, which I certainly didn't expect. Put it simply, this is one of the key differentiators that every business needs to prioritize. And it's really important to understand the root of that. Many people in the Gen Z demographic are very close to their aging grandparents or very close to their near family, and they're very conscious of the risk that they pose to their families if they travel or if they don't take enough precaution. And this is one of the reasons why safety is so important. So it means to win their customers, businesses must really demonstrate that they don't just follow guidelines, but that they also make safety part of their unique selling point, part of what differentiates themselves. And so by doing this, businesses can stand apart from the competition. They can use this opportunity and this need to redesign, but also innovate and introduce new product concepts, and ultimately look at the service delivery and how they can differentiate themselves around the pivot of safety. And this is really a big opportunity, I think, that some businesses have really grasped and others have perhaps not realized is so important right now, to go beyond the government guidelines. The other consideration, perhaps surprisingly to many, is sustainability. And perhaps it's not surprising that sustainability is a priority, but for that generation, sustainability is a must, and it's an absolute necessity. So unlike millennials, amongst whom many were very socially conscious on such issues, future generations are completely defined by it. And that's the big difference. And this means that the other side of your competitive edge will be on being able to manage and reposition yourself in these two defining moments of our time: the pandemic and the social impact of that, and also the planet and the heightened awareness around that. And in fact, digital, of course, is also one of those defining moments, but this is where digital is more of a means than the end. So it's not something we should view in isolation to the bigger issues that concern potential travelers.
I think this is all like a world, a new normality in the making. There's so many new factors that are really changing and shaping the way we are interacting and actually, at the end, traveling. Now that we are kind of warming up, let's move on to maybe the topic or the core of today's edition, which is more on rural tourism, on how we can concentrate and basically move into different areas of the territories, all the tourism flows. You are very used to work, Nick, with DMOs, with destination management organizations, and probably some of them are more focusing on rural contexts. What could be, or what are the three top recommendations that you usually provide to these DMOs so that they keep their authentic and differentiated and genuine flair?
Great question. And as you perhaps know, we were involved in the Charm project, which is featured later at Forum TurisTIC. And we had the opportunity to analyze the promotion of rural destinations. And in fact, what we could see is that the issues and opportunities experienced by urban and rural destinations are often diametrically opposed to each other. And that in itself can be seen as an opportunity. So while cities face challenges related to over-tourism and pressures on housing and infrastructure, on the other hand, rural destinations suffer issues related to seasonality, and yet they depend on tourism for their very survival. So a key recommendation really for rural DMOs is to focus heavily on experience development, to design new experiences which help address these issues, to create less dependency on a seasonal market, and to establish more diversified business models. In rural destinations, the tourism economy is genuinely thriving when it's focused on the local rural economy. And those two economies should really go hand in hand. Visitors increasingly want to learn, grow, and broaden their experiences. And this is something that rural environments can often give back to visitors. Yet they have to have a successful rural economy in place first, which can coexist in parallel and celebrates the land and the environment. So with the right balance of new and diversified experiences, appealing to locals or nearby city dwellers or further afield visitors, perhaps even from abroad, together with a refocused rural production, whether that's wine, crafts, or produce, businesses can really find opportunities to create very strong brand concepts, interesting city and rural collaborations, for example, and really prosper with a much more diversified economy. And beyond this, there really are so many opportunities rooted in collaborative concepts, whether, for example, that's city DMOs working with regional DMOs to broaden their offer, or whether that's commercial producers teaming up with well-known restaurants, for example, to create combined or paired visitor experiences. And the key thinking that needs to be understood and established is that we all grow together if we work together. And so that collaborative joined up thinking is absolutely key, not only within, for example, a specific destination, like a rural destination, but also between different destinations to identify opportunities and also think creatively, perhaps even outside of the tourism sector.
I'm a strong advocate, Nick, that rural DMOs, despite the fact that they might be lacking in capacity and resources, they might have a very good vision. And I'm sure that they would like to do many things, but they are constrained to the reality. And what we were saying before, many of them have a very, very small structure, which doesn't really allow them to diversify their roles. But also dealing with all these DMOs, what would be the top 3 mistakes that you keep on seeing when you consult with these DMOs?
You're encouraging me to be controversial, so I will take the opportunity as it's rarely given. Well, first of all, I think to touch on rural DMOs are, as you say, often very small. They have very limited financial and human resources. And so it's important to choose a focus, to think about where they can prioritize and where they can be strong. We've seen so much in the past, a huge focus on marketing and promotion, but this isn't always necessarily the right focus to take. So now looking at the bigger picture of DMOs, and I perhaps first of all want to stress that these examples go globally. So this is not Catalonia and this is not Spain, but this is based on global and international experience. I think that's important to stress that. one of the key things that I've seen as an issue is for DMOs to take true ownership of their ideas and work. And this is probably one of the most common mistakes I've seen in the last decade. Those that truly own their creative ideas, their strategic direction, their content, their marketing activities, and their brand story are always those that are on the competitive edge. And there are so many that succeed in this area, namely those that we feature in our own activities at the DTTT. However, there are just as many who also depend heavily on agencies outsourcing their strategic and creative thinking, and therefore they never really take full ownership of their own direction or message. But there is a happy medium, and some of the best examples of DMOs are those that are truly in control of their creative and strategic direction, but they're also very demanding of their agencies, and they demand that they deliver results in accordance with their strategic direction and their expectations. And these are the ones that really succeed the best, I think. Another issue, sadly, is politics. We see this manifest itself in many different ways, both from internal politics altering the direction of teams, or worse, even killing their creativity and confidence, but also in external politics, where this is also a big issue. And all too often, I've seen DMOs engage in projects which aren't right for them because of political pressures, or they become distracted in projects or priorities which divert their core competencies and their priorities. And this just has an overall impact on competitiveness, but also on the output. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen teams paralyzed because they're waiting on the outcome of a pending election, or they ditch an entire program because of a change of government. And this is just very sad to see because, of course, it's ultimately public funds and it should deliver great results. And the other thing is leadership. This is a very broad concept and it's understood differently by different people. And I like to call it leadership with a small L because I think good leadership comes in many forms, from open-mindedness and progressive leadership at the top to the decision to take ownership of a project within a team. And in essence, I would love to see a stronger sense of leadership generally. I'd love to see DMOs that really know what they want, where their place is, what their role is, and how they can have an impact, and what their sense of purpose is. This is more of an opportunity than a criticism, I think, for DMOs, but I would love to see a stronger understanding of the true meaning of leadership from DMOs and the teaching of values and leadership techniques for the benefit of all. And I think this would just be a great outcome to see from all of this crisis that we're facing right now.
I think your controversial skills, the way of being controversial was very British in this case, but that was helpful and that was also very interesting to hear. Thinking about staycations, many of you probably are not aware of this new concept of doing holidays nearby, near our basically place of residence. And has this impasse, Nick, help us to give further importance to staycations and a true sense of appreciation of nearby tourism assets that had been neglected?
Yeah, absolutely, without any question. We've all had and been taught to appreciate what we have on our doorstep, in particular in the most intense period of lockdown, where we could perhaps only go into our local neighborhood. And appreciating what we have on our doorstep is surely a good thing. And beyond just discovering what we have nearby, we've also learned more about the supply chain and how much different businesses heavily depend on tourism, such as farms or produce, and how linked they are to, for example, premium restaurants. So it's really important to really embrace this opportunity right now. And the great thing is that the regular citizen has now become much better acquainted with the nature that's on their doorstep and many of the businesses which they perhaps didn't appreciate before. And in many parts of the world, I think probably in every country, there are certain areas which are neglected because they've in the past had a boom, and in recent decades, they haven't had so much success. So in the UK, for example, there are many examples of places which have seen neglect, which were former thriving tourism destinations. And this is really an opportunity to revive these. Sadly, we know that international travel will be impacted for some time, and it's highly likely that summer of 2021 will still have very low international visitor numbers once again. But this means we should now look to invest in our tourism assets, look to really reinvest in those that have become neglected over the years, and not just for the current moment, but also for the long-term recovery, so that we can try to create a better balance as we start to think about how we can spread the value of tourism and ensure that the whole of society benefits from that economy.
That was a strong message, and I thank you for that. I'm looking at the watch, and we still have a few more minutes before we end this session. I have one last question, and maybe that's the tricky one, and that's the one that will trigger you being more controversial. But I would like to hear from you, what we think is ensuring market access and inclusiveness for local businesses in rural destinations is a pending matter in many countries. Do you have any ideas to speed up this process so that they can also play a more prominent role in the tourism market?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, first of all, participation in the tourism market requires us as an industry to persuade non-tourism businesses to consider the opportunities. For those that are currently considered as tourism businesses, there is a strong level of interest in developing their offer further. But for those who are not involved in tourism, there's a strong curiosity about what tourism can bring them. And we only need to look at the great examples of vineyards that have really expanded into tourism by diversifying their model. And this expansion can be done through infrastructure investment. It can be done through business design or redesign, and it can also be done through their positioning strategy. The opportunity for non-tourism businesses to diversify into tourism, say, for example, as a producer, is to not only focus on the additional potential revenue stream, but also think about the opportunity to broaden the brand awareness amongst that visitor economy, and also identify new opportunities for export. And public funds and programs have to be designed to support and enable businesses to develop their visitor experiences and to also exploit their distribution networks to better leverage the potential link with that rural environment. So that could be the land upon which they're inextricably linked, or the way in which they produce something which is so inextricably linked to tradition. There's so much opportunity for rural development to go so much further than it has done so far. But there are also many, many success cases and stories around that. So if the question is, how can we accelerate that process? The answer would be to seize the opportunity that we have right now, to find where there is renewed demand for extra urban experiences, tapping into that staycation market, thinking about how, for example, that weekend city tripper has become a weekend road tripper, and think about the many more momentary shifts that we are seeing right now amongst consumers who are looking for something different, to use this moment to design, to develop, and to create product which consumers are seeking right now, to consider how inextricably linked the local environment when we talk about rural experiences can be found in the opportunity of the visitor economy, and to build on those really, really key aspects of sustainability to create a better and a stronger brand experience, which is linked to the local environment, which provides something which is much more authentic, much more value-driven, and of course, creates longevity for the future, so that we're better positioned to weather any future storm wherever it may come from.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your inputs. I think all the audience and myself, we were delighted to listen to all your answers. It's 11 o'clock sharp. I think that the caffeine levels are really dropping significantly. So before we break for the coffee, I would like to call for any of the spectators, if you have any questions, si tienen cualquier tipo de pregunta que querrían formular, sea en inglés o en castellano, para Nick Hall. Tenemos quizá ahí un par de minutos. Even I'm calling all the audience online, all the people we have at home, at the office. We have a lady over there, please. And we'll try, intentemos ser muy breves, por favor. Gracias. Try to be brief.
Good morning. Nice to meet you. I would like to know what do you think about certifications in sustainability in the touristic sector? And do you know that they can provoke a change in the sector? And if you know about biosphere certification or any other certification that's worthy.
That's a very good question. Thank you for asking it. And actually, it's a really great example of one of the ways in which businesses can not only start to change their processes, but also start to prioritize and demonstrate their actions in sustainability. One of the best examples that I would reference would be GSTC. They create a certification model which can be adapted and applied to different types of tourism businesses, as well as destinations themselves. And GSTC provides a really strong framework which businesses can follow to both measure, but also make improvements and take steps towards creating lower impact and more sustainable business practices. And this, of course, will also allow businesses to be able to persuade and convince and demonstrate to their customers the steps that they take. Now, if we look at the destination side of certification, this is slightly newer, but it's just as much an opportunity, because GSTC, as an example, are starting to work with destinations to create leverage. So inviting businesses to be part of campaigns and future programs only if they take those steps towards certification. And by doing this, they can have a much more significant impact on the whole destination by driving it towards sustainability. A very different example is Helsinki. As a city, Helsinki have created something called Sustainable Helsinki. And this is a self-certifying model where they've created a set of around 20 different criteria where businesses can self-evaluate and set their own standards. So it's built on trust, but they believe that this is the best way to approach it by giving businesses a carrot that it incentivizes them to make those changes. And then, of course, if we look outside of tourism, there are many more. And one that a number of tourism businesses have engaged with is an organization called B Corporation. And this is much more focused on having a wider impact on society and giving back, but it's also much more designed towards the private sector and is also a very interesting program. Ultimately, it's a choice as to which certification program is right, depending on your circumstances, your customer, and your business. But ultimately, it is a very important step to take, and data and measurement is a key part of taking those steps on sustainability.
Thank you so much for the answer. As you can see, the world of eco-certification opens a new door to a lot of debate, but I think we should better stop here because we should try to respect the time. Truly thank you for your time today and for being with us here in Barcelona. Nick, all the best from here to the UK.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I hope to be back with you in person soon.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you very much. Thank you. Big applause, please.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Muy bien. Ya veo otras caras en la audiencia, ya sonreímos, pero ahora creo que necesitamos un poco de cafeína, ¿sí? Entonces, si les parece, señoras y señores, vamos a desalojar la sala para que podamos hacer una renovación del aire. Eso también de acuerdo con este plan que estamos siguiendo a cabo para respetar todo lo que son medidas de higiene. Haremos la salida por las dos salidas de forma escalonada, así que agradecería que empezaran, un momentito por favor, empiezan a salir desde las filas de arriba. Recuerden llevar siempre la mascarilla en todo momento, solo cuando estén tomando el refrigerio, que se encuentra en la primera planta, en los carrers modernistas. Ahí verán que hay personal de apoyo que les va a decir si algún espacio ya está suficientemente lleno, que por favor muevan al otro espacio, ¿de acuerdo? Es importante que estemos todos aquí a las 11:45, de aquí a 40 minutos, ¿de acuerdo? Les rogaría que por favor volvieran para escuchar las siguientes ponencias. Muchas gracias.